You can feel the frost bite into your skin. The chains around your wrists are rusted, blood-crusted, and cold. So cold they burn. You've been here for hours, or maybe days. Time no longer means anything. All that remains is pain, betrayal, and the distant echo of footsteps. Closer now. You used to be feared. You were fear itself. But tonight, you are prey. The wooden floor beneath you creaks. A door opens. Light floods your cell like judgment. Shadows move. Soldiers, mercenaries, maybe even nobles. Their faces are blurred, but their intent is clear. They are not here to save you. They are here to finish a story. Your story. They don't speak. They don't need to. One of them raises a blade, not to free you, but to present you. You are to be beheaded, your head dipped in honey, and sent across the sea as a trophy. You, who turned men into forests of corpses, will now become a relic, a curiosity. As the cold steel touches your throat, a thought claws through the madness. How did it come to this? How did the Impaler Prince become a ghost in his own legend? Stay with us. This is not just the story of Vlad Dracula. It is the story of how power corrupts, how fear consumes, and how even monsters can be betrayed. Like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments, would you have ruled differently? Or was this always your fate? Where are you watching from? And what do you think was Vlad's final thought? Vlad III was not born a monster. He was forged into one. The son of Vlad II, Dracul, a member of the secretive Order of the Dragon, young Vlad was taken as a hostage by the Ottoman Empire at just 11 years old. There, in the stone corridors of Edirne, he learned the language of power, pain, survival, and control. When his father and older brother were assassinated, betrayed by Wallachian nobles, Vlad returned home not as a boy, but as a blade. Wallachia was a fractured land, torn between Hungarian influence and Ottoman dominance. And Vlad, driven by vengeance, sharpened by trauma, seized the throne in 1456. He did not build trust, he built fear. His methods were surgical and spectacular. Nobles who had betrayed his family were invited to a banquet, only to be impaled on stakes afterward, their bodies left to rot as warnings. He punished theft, treason, and even laziness with brutal precision. He ruled through terror, and in doing so, he unified a divided realm. But there was a deeper message in his cruelty. Justice, he claimed, not chaos. To the peasants, he was draconic, but fair, punishing the corrupt elite who had long abused them. To the West, he became a terrifying curiosity. To the Ottomans, a problem, a man who would not bow. Vlad was no puppet king. He was iron, fire, and vengeance made flesh. And the world had never seen anything like him. At first, the people whispered of justice, but justice began to rot into spectacle. Vlad's punishments grew more elaborate, more theatrical. Impalement was no longer just a sentence, it became an art. Victims were hoisted onto greased stakes, left to die slowly over hours, sometimes days. The screams became part of the landscape. Then came Targoviste, his masterpiece of terror. In 1462, as the Ottoman army advanced, they found a forest. Not of trees, but of bodies. Over 20,000 corpses impaled in perfect rows outside the capital. Men, women, children, even animals. The air choked with decay. It was not just a warning, it was psychological warfare. The Sultan himself, Mehmed II, turned back. Even he, the conqueror of Constantinople, was shaken. Western envoys wrote home in horror. A Saxon merchant described towns filled with corpses like marketplaces, and ambassadors who offended Vlad reportedly returned with no eyes, no ears, no tongues. Church leaders began to hesitate. Whispers spread. Was this still justice? or had Vlad become something else? Historian Matej Kazaku noted, "He used terror to eliminate crime, but also to eliminate identity. No one could exist outside his shadow. And in that growing shadow, even his allies began to feel uneasy. The line between ruler and reaper had blurred. And Vlad, either by design or by descent into madness, crossed it willingly. The people no longer called him Prince. They called him Demise, the Impaler." Fear can silence rebellion, but it can never silence conspiracy. As Vlad's rule grew darker, the walls around him began to shift. The very boyars he had once spared, some out of strategy, some out of mercy, now whispered in shadows. They saw the bodies piling, the blood flowing, and realized this was not justice. This was annihilation. And then there was Radu. Vlad's younger brother, Radu cel Frumos, Radu the Handsome, had remained in Ottoman hands. Unlike Vlad, Radu had embraced life in Edirne. He converted to Islam, became a favorite of the Sultan, and was now dispatched back to Wallachia. Not as a diplomat, but as a weapon. The Ottomans offered the people a gentler ruler, and many accepted. Even Wallachia's Orthodox clergy, once passive, began to align with Radu. Vlad's grip on the throne tightened, desperately, violently. He no longer trusted his nobles, his advisors, not even his own blood. Some sources claim he executed his mistress, accusing her of betrayal. Others speak of entire villages burned for suspected disloyalty. In the winter of 1462, as Ottoman forces advanced and his own alliances crumbled, Vlad turned to Hungary for help. But instead of aid, he was betrayed again. King Matthias Corvinus of Hungary, under pressure from both the Ottomans and the papacy, had Vlad arrested. Documents surfaced accusing Vlad of conspiring with the Turks. They were forged. Historian Kurt W. Treptow writes, "Vlad was sacrificed by the West, feared by the East, and discarded by those who once cheered him. His own people had turned. His brother led the enemy, and the throne he had drowned in blood now stood empty. Power built on fear had no friends, only silence. Vlad was no longer a prince. He was a pawn. Captured by the Hungarians in 1462, he was paraded through chains, his enemies reveling in his downfall. The man who impaled thousands now faced a cage, a crownless exile. But his imprisonment was not just punishment, it was strategy. The Ottoman Empire had grown too powerful, and Vlad too unstable to be a reliable ally. Hungarian King Matthias Corvinus needed an excuse. So, forged letters, allegedly written by Vlad to the Ottomans, were presented to the Pope. In them, Vlad appeared to offer allegiance to the Sultan. The letters were a fabrication, but they worked. The papacy withdrew support. Western Europe turned away. The man once hailed as a crusader against Islam was now branded a traitor, a liar, a butcher without cause. Historian Radu Florescu reflects, his legend was not just shaped by his violence, but by the politics that buried him. For 12 years, Vlad rotted in Hungarian custody, and yet, his myth grew. Stories of the Impaler spread across Europe like wildfire. In German pamphlets, he was a vampire. In Russian tales, a tyrant kissed by the devil. In Romanian folklore, a protector betrayed by cowards. The truth was murkier than any legend. In time, Hungary saw use for him again. Ottoman pressure increased, and suddenly, the same Vlad they had jailed became necessary. In 1476, Vlad was released, given soldiers, and a fragile chance to reclaim his throne. But Romania had changed, and Vlad would return not as a savior, but as a shadow of his former self. When Vlad stepped back onto Wallachian soil in 1476, the air no longer remembered him. 12 years in captivity had dulled the terror that once held the land. His enemies had grown bolder. His supporters, scarce, scattered, or dead. The throne was his again, but only on paper. Hungary backed his return, but the support was superficial. He had no army of his own, no wealth, and no loyalty left among the boyars. His brother Radu had died, but his enemies remained entrenched, some in Wallachia, some watching from across the Danube. Vlad tried to rebuild, but the weight of years, betrayal, and exile had made him paranoid. Every shadow looked like an assassin, every whisper a plot. In December 1476, while traveling through a dense forest near Bucharest, Vlad and a small contingent were ambushed by either Ottoman forces or Wallachian conspirators. The exact details remain murky. Some say it was a calculated Ottoman strike. Others say it was his own men, confused or bribed. Either way, the result was final. Vlad was dead. He did not fall on a battlefield. He was not surrounded by enemies, sword in hand. He was hunted, cornered, and butchered in the cold. For a man who ruled through terror and spectacle, there was no grand stage for his end. Only trees, only silence, only blood on the snow. They didn't just kill Vlad, they erased him. According to Ottoman chronicles, his decapitated body was left to rot in the woods where he fell, buried, if at all, in an unmarked grave. But his head, that infamous face twisted by cruelty and brilliance, was preserved in honey, a grotesque tribute to its legacy. It was taken across the Danube through the Ottoman lines and delivered to Sultan Mehmed II in Constantinople. The same sultan who had once turned back at the sight of Vlad's Forest of the Impaled now gazed upon his enemy's severed head. It was impaled on a stake, ironic, almost poetic, and displayed at the city gates for all to see. The message was clear. The monster is dead. But the fear? That remained. Even in death, Vlad's name stirred unease. Turkish soldiers whispered that his ghost walked at night. Locals claimed animals refused to cross the place where he was ambushed. His burial site remains a mystery. Some believe it lies beneath the monastery of Snagov. Others say it was desecrated and lost forever. Historian Leonikos Chalkokondyles wrote, "The Turks feared him, even in death, for they knew his cruelty lived longer than his breath." Vlad had become a symbol, not of Wallachia, not of victory, but of vengeance unleashed. A head on a spike, watching history forget the man and worship the myth. Centuries have passed, but the shadow of Vlad the Impaler still lingers, longer than any empire he fought. To the west, he became a legend of horror. German pamphlets from the 15th century painted him as a sadistic lunatic who dined among the dying. These stories evolved, twisting through folklore, fables, and eventually fiction. By the 19th century, Bram Stoker found his name in an old history book, and from that seed, he wrote Dracula, a vampire born from Vlad's ashes. Undead, immortal, cursed. But for many Romanians, the myth is more complicated. To them, Vlad was not a monster. He was a defender, a man who stood between Christendom and the Ottoman tide. A ruler who dared to defy empires, who punished corruption, and who paid the price for refusing to bend. His statues stand in Wallachia. Streets bear his name. Some call him a national hero. So what was he? A sadist who reveled in agony? A patriot who used fear as a weapon? Or simply a product of his time? A time soaked in blood, betrayal, and endless war. Historian Konstantin Rezachev observed, "The world wants monsters it can understand." Vlad was neither simple nor safe. That is why he still haunts us. His body vanished, his crown lost. But his story, twisted and retold, never died. He ruled with terror. He died alone. and in the end, he became immortal.